Hey guys, welcome back to Honey and the Rock, episode 108. I'm Sophie, and this is Mary Garcia.
Hi!
I guess how we met. We are in wellness class together. Basically the first day I was like, I don't know anybody. I was like, this is so scary. It was literally my first class ever of college.
Oh wait, I didn't even know that.
And I walk in, I'm like, where do I sit? And I just like sat next to some girls. Like I don't even remember who I sat next to. And I was like, okay, they were like juniors or seniors. And I was like, they did not really want to talk to me, but that's okay. And it was like, whatever, like got through the first class. And then the next day we're in like the gym.
Like working out.
And we were put into two different groups. Like we were not in the same group. She was in the orientation group first, and I was in the workout class first, and then we were going to switch. And I am on a bike by myself, like, sort of like, this is the most awkward thing I've ever done in my life. Like, what is college? And then she stands in front of me and just starts laughing. And I was like, okay, we're going to be friends. And I don't really remember after that. I feel like the next day you were like, do you want to sit next to me? And I was like, please. And now we're friends.
And we're friends since.
And like, yeah, I feel like that's how it happened. But it was like, I was like, this is so awkward. Like, I don't know anybody. And then I'm like, well, she's laughing at me. And not really at me, but she's just laughing.
I'm laughing with.
Good. I'm like, please help me. Because it was just so awkward and forced at first. Because, like, you're, like, being told how to work out, but everyone's working out differently. And all different, like, ranges of working out. Just, like, biking alone.
I just remember because I was kind of in the same boat. Like, I didn't know people in the class. I remember seeing her, and I was like, I'm just going to be your friend.
And I'm like, hi, I'm Mary Garcia. I'm like, hi, I'm Sophie. Please talk to me. So that's how we are met. And here we are. So, tell us about yourself. Who are you?
Okay, I'm Mary Garcia. I'm a sophomore here at Furman. I'm a French and psychology double major. I had to think about that.
Okay,
Oui, oui.
Can you say, I was going to say something.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Mary Garcia.
Oh. Did you say, hi, my name is Mary Garcia?
Yes!
I only knew that because of that. Garcia?
Oh.
I said that. Okay, so continue.
I live in Hendersonville, North Carolina. I'm the fourth of 5 kids.
Okay.
Yeah, so most of my siblings are older than me. I have one younger who's also a freshman in college, which is kind of fun.
Sweet.
I'm an aunt, so I have 2 nephews, which is like the best ever. Both my parents also went to Furman, and my dad still works here. So.
Love it. Does he drive here every morning?
Yeah, he commutes every day.
That is dedication.
I know. He really loves Furman.
Wow, like I would not be doing that. That's kind of, how far away is it? An hour?
It's like 45 minutes. If there's traffic, an hour.
45 minutes is, I was going to get, like, my first guess was an hour and a half.
Yeah.
And then I was like, okay, let's be realistic.
Yeah. But it's really beautiful. It's like through the mountains.
Okay. And, you know, you listen to some good music or something.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I love it. I also didn't know you had 2 nephews. I thought you had, well, I knew you were an aunt because, like, when you gave that speech and you were reading it to me, you said, like, a grandpa. And I'm like, oh, so your dad's grandpa? That means you have some.
So my oldest sister, has 2 little boys.
Sweet.
They're so cute.
Okay, fun. Okay, I guess we'll just dive right in.
Let's do it.
Okay, whoa. Stutter much. Tell us about yourself and Jesus.
Okay, so I was born in Virginia, South Boston, Virginia, and I grew up in a Christian household. Both my parents are Christians, have always kind of like modeled what it looks like to live a life with Christ for me and all of my siblings, which is like such a blessing. And I think sometimes like I can take that for granted because I'm just so used to it. It's just like so normal to me.
Right.
And so I grew up in the church, and I was like very involved in the church. Like I loved it, but I was also homeschooled until 6th grade. So like my church life was like what I lived for. Right. And I just loved it. And then I was baptized when I was 7, and I remember like I think like before that I went to someone else's baptism, and like I didn't really understand what it was.
Right.
And then I was like, they were asking them the questions before they were baptized, like, do you believe that Jesus is your father? And I was like, wait a second, like, yes. And I just like felt God in me, and I was like, oh my gosh, like this is just such a vivid memory. I was like, I'm gonna do that. And then I went to my pastor, and I was like, I want to be baptized.
Yeah. Like me, please.
Yes. Sweet. And then my parents sat me down, and they're like, yes, like it's like you want to, and like everything, but like what does that really mean to you? So
do you understand this?
Right? Yeah, talking to them about it. And like as a child, like I think I really did. Like I was just like, I just loved the Lord, and I was like, this is it.
Right.
And I think like this isn't like not even about me. I think there's just something like so pure and amazing about children's love for God.
Yeah.
Like
childlike faith.
it's incredible.
Yeah.
And like I wish now sometimes I'm like, I wish I could just have that
Yes.
sometimes. Like
Go back
it's
to
just
that.
so good. And it's
Yeah.
so like I just never questioned the Lord.
No.
Ever.
Yeah.
I was like, this is great.
Right.
So then I was baptized. And then when I was 11, my family made a big move to North Carolina, which
Okay.
was a lot for me because
Yep.
then I ended up starting school because both my parents had to work, so I couldn't be
Okay, got
homeschooled
it.
anymore,
Right.
which was a huge shift
Right.
and a little bit scary. But I ended up going to a Christian private school in Fletcher, North Carolina,
Okay.
which was so good. Like we would have
Right.
chapels every week. I got really involved in the worship team.
Mm-hmm.
So again, just like the reiteration of like Christ was still the center of my life, which
Right.
was great.
Yep.
But then my sophomore year in high school, I don't know what it was related to. I know I was switching friend groups, like because people in high school
Weird.
they can
Yes.
get weird.
Yes.
It was after COVID too. Like we had
Okay.
gone back to
Yeah.
school, so a lot of my friends had graduated because I
Mhm.
was really close to the seniors my freshman year.
Okay.
And I entered a really, really rough time with my mental health.
Okay.
And like I was just so shut down. I was really struggling with depression, like anxiety around eating, and just like at a really, really low point in my life.
Yeah.
And I just remember being like, I was so just like pent up with anger,
Yeah.
like every single day.
Yeah.
And at that time, I don't think I would have said that.
Okay.
Like I wouldn't acknowledge that. Like
Right.
I didn't see what was going wrong. I just thought this was normal life.
Yeah.
But like it was so bad, and I was like putting a lot of that anger onto God.
Okay.
I was like, Lord, why? Like,
Mm.
why would you abandon me? Why would you make me go through all of this?
Yeah.
Like, you've been faithful like my whole life. And then I think I started seeing it as, oh, like that's just how I was raised. Like, I don't know. I kind of started to turn it on like that.
Right.
And then one day, but I was still like, going to church every
Right.
Sunday. I was still having these chapels that I was going to, still on the worship team,
Right.
but like internally,
Yes.
I was
Like from
just
the outside,
angry.
it probably looked really
Yeah.
good still.
Yeah, from the
Yeah.
outside, people were like, oh, nothing's wrong. Like, her faith is so strong,
Right.
which also kind of made me struggle more.
Yes.
Because I was like, what is happening if
Right.
everyone's perceiving me this way, but inside, like,
Yeah.
I'm struggling so
Right.
much.
And you're just going to keep pretending. And
Exactly.
pretending.
And I didn't know how to stop. And I
Right.
was so angry, and I felt so abandoned by God. And, like, I don't even know, like, I really didn't open up about that. Like, not even to my family, because I
Right.
felt, like, so deeply ashamed. I was like,
Right.
something's wrong with me.
Yeah.
And then I remember I was sitting in on this sermon one time. I think I was at like a summer camp or something.
Okay.
And I remember the pastor saying, like, you cannot just sit around waiting for Jesus to show up in your life. Like, his arms are wide open and he is there for you all the time. Like,
Right.
he is waiting on you.
Right.
You need to make that step. So you can't just
Right.
like sit around and be like, God, like, make yourself clear to me. Like,
Right.
I'm waiting. It's like,
Right.
no, he's doing
He's
that.
making it right.
Yeah. His arms are wide open.
That's good.
And I just remember I was like, oh my gosh, like, what am I doing?
Yeah.
Because I was like, I guess, I don't know. I was so stubborn. I was like,
Right.
okay, God, like, do your thing.
Yep.
But I wasn't doing anything on my end.
Right.
And then I was like, okay.
You just had to go to him.
Yeah.
Right.
And then I did. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I finally started to get some traction. And then my junior year, I got into a relationship that was like really Christ-centered.
Okay.
And like that was really good. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, I'm so happy. I'm finally finding this
Right.
again. But I think, and that lasted like through my whole senior year too, and most of my freshman year here at Furman too. And that was really good. But it was also, I think a lot of it is like I was believing through my relationship as opposed to believing outside of my relationship.
Yes.
And so when that relationship ended, I was like, oh crap, where's my relationship with God?
Right.
Like, where's my foundation? Like, it was like, I still strongly believed in God. I had a personal relationship with him, especially coming to college, because that's when it really gets like personal. And it's still communal, but like you really find out, okay, like, where do my priorities lie?
Yeah.
But then coming out of that relationship, I was like, okay, I think I just lost part of my foundation.
Right.
And I should not have been putting it in relationships. Like, my relationship with God should come first before anything else.
Whoa. That's good.
So then that kind of switched. And then this past summer, I was like, no, I'm going to go into this school year with like God being the center of everything.
Right.
And I really want to have that mentality, and I want to be able to use that to also like help other people. And like working as an orientation leader, I want to model that for like my freshmen in my group, and know like, no, there is a community here at Furman. Like there's so many great opportunities. Like God is here and working.
Yeah. That's so good.
Yeah.
So now there's some good construction happening. So hopefully you can't hear it. That's so good. And I think I've experienced a lot of that, and now the air conditioning turns on. He's like, "What's up, girls?" But I think a lot, like that beginning or middle more of your story in high school, I think a lot of people experience that it comes from feeling out of control.
Yeah. Oh, for sure.
And thinking we want that control back, but in reality, like as believers, like we don't have control. I mean, even non-believers, nobody has control, and it's just like searching for it and grasping for it. And sometimes that comes out in the ways like anxiety or eating disorders or depression.
Exactly.
Seeing that like a lot in my life too. But it's that switch of like realizing like, wait, he was my first love, and going back to that childlike faith of like, it's not immature. Well, it might be like it grows, but it's not like this silly little thing. It's like that's just all they know, and you just love. Like you love well as a kid, and even like when you have questions as a kid, it's not like a shame thing.
No.
But I think it's really interesting that it was like a shame thing. Like, what's wrong with me? What's hiding this? And putting on that fake face. And like, I got good at that too. Like, I had such a good fake thing. And I even was like looking back through pictures the other day of like a season of life where I was like rock bottom.
Yeah.
Wouldn't know from the pictures I took either.
Me too.
Which was like so interesting. I was like, wait, this is weird. I thought I was going to just find like really sad photos looking through, and it just wasn't that way. And so I think there is something to that of like, what does it look like to struggle without shame? And I don't know the answer to this. It's more like rhetorical, like, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And not to feel shame, because we're not, that's not helping anything, and that's not growing us closer to God. It's actually pushing us farther from God.
Oh, yeah.
And it brings the anger out, like you were saying. And then it's like, what do you do with anger? It's like, what do you do with these things?
Yeah.
But I feel like it all roots back down to the need of control. And when we realize that we're out of control, then we start spiraling, and then you spiral, and then you feel shame, and you feel farther from God. Then when you feel shame, you feel anger to God. And then when you're angry at God, you just like, your heart gets hardened.
Yeah.
And so I feel like that's like kind of like a cycle I think happens a lot.
For sure.
And then what's interesting, I think, again, about your story, I feel like I'm repeating your story, but the interesting part of then almost like when you get better with somebody else, then it's like, oh, so then you almost make them God in life.
Yeah.
When technically that wasn't a bad thing, but then when they become the God in your life, it's like, well, who am I with just Jesus? And I think that is a big thing.
Exactly.
About relationships, and just like what I'm learning now is like, this is actually feels silly to say out loud, but like praying for my future relationship
100%.
in that way.
Yeah.
Of being like, God, like start helping him follow you now. And pursuing you full heartedly now, because I don't want him to start pursuing you just for me.
Yeah.
Or even the other way around, like I don't want to just start pursuing God for a guy. But I want him to pursue God because he loves him,
God,
and he wants to become more like Christ. And then when we come together one day, like two is better than one in that, but not one way of like we're dependent on each other in our relationship,
and like
with
God
Jesus.
being the focal point.
Yes. Yeah. But then in that, like when if something happens, even in friendships, like am I still going to be okay with God without this person? And I think what it looks like to rely on community, but first it needs to be you and God.
Yeah.
And so I really like that part of your story. And then how it ends not in giving up, or ends of like, oh, well, too hard. Like, this happened, this happened, this happened, this happened. I got close to God, and then this happened. Okay, not worth it. But how it's like, okay, I'm going to put my big girl pants on and realize like, I need to walk back to God.
Yeah.
Run. Actually, it's like more like stop.
Yeah.
It's like sometimes I envision it like him running behind me. Not kind of chasing me. And I am like running from him, but I just need to stop and let him grab me
and just
and swoop me up. And it's not in my power, and it's not what I can do, but it's what he already did on the cross. And then the freedom that is found after that.
And I keep you know, sometimes I feel like, because I've had like these bumps in the road with my faith, like there's never a point where I've like denied that like Jesus is my savior, but there's
Right.
definitely been points where it's like I said, I was angry, or I was
Right.
putting my faith in other people, or like
Right.
believing through other people, I
yeah.
guess. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I'm not as good as like a Christian, or like whatever, I don't know. And so sometimes I just have to like check myself and be like, no, that's not
No.
a measurement
No.
of like my faith at all.
No.
And like I just like pray to God and be like, God, you know, help me strengthen my faith, help me be a disciple for you. And like the thing that just like keeps like going in my head, like from God, is like, it's just getting started. It's just getting started. And I'm like that is so cool.
Right.
Like you can be anywhere in your walk in faith, and like just like bam, things can change, and you can like help people and like do so much with it.
Right.
Which
It's
is
so
so
exciting.
cool. Yeah.
And I had a point, but I kind of forgot it because I was like locked in. And then the whole time I was thinking, like, when do I tell them that I think you're Lauren Daigle? And then I'm like, that's not the appropriate time, so that's not all I can think about. If you're watching this, like, tell me she does not give Lauren Daigle vibes. Like, she's like so Lauren Daigle's like cousin or something.
We have a joke that I'm her sister.
Yeah.
Like, so when she's playing, I'm like, oh, there's my sister.
There's your sister.
Catch
okay, I'm sorry. Yeah. That was so distracting. But I just was like trying to find the time to say that because we were having a good conversation. I don't even remember what I was gonna say. But I think there's a lot of power. I was gonna say like the faithfulness part of being like, well, the Lord's been faithful to me up until now, and now He's not. And it's not that He's not being faithful then, because His faithfulness is not determined by our outward like circumstances or even our inward like heart posture. And I think that's something that like I used to be like, oh, well, He was faithful then, but then He wasn't faithful here.
Yeah.
And God was faithful to me when He brought me to Furman, but God was not faithful to me when this happened and this happened and this happened.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, actually, like, no, He was faithful even then.
Yeah, like it's not a point system.
Yes, no, and He's always faithful because that's who He is. It's not like one day He decides to wake up to be faithful. It's like God, Jesus is always faithful to us. And it's our heart posture to see that He's faithful even then.
For sure.
And I think that's just something that comes up in my life a lot. Like, He's faithful even then.
Yeah.
Even then in the hard and even then in the good. And it goes with the valley of like what you're saying, like the bump in the road. Like sometimes there's these bumps and valleys, and I'm quick to be like, oh, I had my valley.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to be on a mountain the rest of my life. And then when I'm back in a valley, I'm like, whoa, like this is not how this was supposed to happen. But He is faithful even then. He's faithful in the valley and on the mountaintop and in the depression and out of the depression. And when times are good and when times are bad. Like He's faithful all of the time. And I just think that's something that's like easily overlooked.
For sure.
Because we judge things by how our circumstances go.
And it's like, I mean, even now I still have days where like I'm definitely still struggling. But it's like you were saying, like that's not a measurement of the lack of faithfulness that Jesus is giving us. Like even in those times that are like caused by like, you know, our like surroundings and sin in the world. But it's like, okay, well in that God can provide like a peace and comfort that surpasses everything.
All understanding.
Understanding.
Literally.
There you go.
And you can't explain that. I was like talking to a friend about that this week. Of like this week was now that they listened to it last week, it was like 4 years of my friend's passing. And like honestly, just like what's the word? Like thinking about? Reflecting back on like the Lord's faithfulness then, and describing, like all I can say sometimes is like there's this peace. Like I can't but I could not explain it. And I feel like you can't explain it until you experience it. Yeah. And allowing yourself to experience the peace that God gives. And that it's like, how do you have peace when something horrible, when the worst thing happens, or when you get the diagnosis, or when you get that phone call? What do? But you cannot describe that peace until you experience it. And it just goes back to the Lord's faithfulness then. Like He didn't have to give us that peace, but He chose to. And so He shows His faithfulness of that. And so for sure, I encourage you, maybe if you're listening, to like write down some ways the Lord has been faithful. Because I think in times of doubt, or in bad times, or in times of like anxiety and depression and all of those things, to go back and read them is like very powerful, because it's easy to forget and be like, well, actually, like He kind of wasn't. And then it's like, wait, let me read and be like, wait, He was.
He was. So like there's so many, like time and time again, everything in my life. Yeah.
Goodness. Well, this was good. Oh, I had one other thing to say about you. It's like, I think this goes with my Lauren Daigle. But like, you know how like we'll be like, oh, like the joy of the Lord is like evident in somebody.
Yeah.
I think that is how you are,
Oh,
and it's like so clear.
so sweet.
And even like how you spoke to me the first time, it's like sometimes like you see it in people, and sometimes like it's you have to like almost like look for it. But I think that's a gift that the Lord can use through you, and so it's like so evident. Like so, even like when it is hard and down and anxiety, like all of these things, but just like clear the joy of the Lord is through you because it's not your control. So I think that's something really sweet about you.
That's so kind.
But do you have anything else you have to say? I can't think of anything else. I feel like we covered it.
Me too.
So fun.
This was so fun.
Um,
I love Sophie.
how did one day we had to walk a mile and a half on the track for our wellness class because
Yeah.
we're wellness girls.
We are wellness girls.
And
Catch us in the gym.
somehow we got like, if we're in the gym in our sweatshirts, we're just trying not to sweat before our next class. I was like, I will literally go back to the gym on my own time.
Mm-hmm. I do.
When
That's
I
what I
don't,
do.
yeah, I'm like, I'm not trying to work out as hard as I possibly can right now, right here, because I'm going to sweat and I have to go to class in 10 minutes. Anyways, this is off topic again. I don't even remember what I was going to say. Oh, we were walking on the track, and you just asked a question, and it was just like, yeah, okay. And then I was like, well, you asked what my major was, and somehow we got to my entire life story.
Oh yeah, and then I found our whole life story.
And so now I'm so happy to hear your whole life story.
Oh,
And like, what do you want to say? Like, I want to listen to yours. Anyway, just wait. And here we are.
yeah,
On
here
the
we are.
podcast. So thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for not letting me ride the bike alone.
Oh, anytime.
And thank you guys for listening. And I'll see